Well, today's topic is for all of you coaches out there, and we're in the studio with Jimmy. And Jimmy, we're talking about creating freedom on your team, but within frameworks. What do we mean by that for coaches?
Well, you know, I've been a coach like you have been, and like many of our audience will be, for a long, long time. And I've always studied the game a little bit about how can I create the maximum possible performance on the field? How can I help my players enjoy the game at the highest level and also perform at the highest level? And what I discovered over time was, in order to get that kind of performance, I needed every single player on the field to play with freedom. This idea that they're not afraid to make mistakes, you know, that they're not worried about getting punished, that they can go out there and take risks within your framework, within the game plan, and not feel like they're going to get punished for that, but instead, they're going to be rewarded for that ability to take risks.
Okay, so I think probably the two extremes then are coaches that give no freedom, and probably coaches that give too much freedom. Is that a thing too?
Yeah, no question.
Yeah.
And you've seen it. You know, you've seen both ends of that spectrum. The one that kind of wants to control everything out on the field, and then those that let anything go, and then, you know, there's no consistency to the way you execute a game plan. So within the context of sport, from a coaching perspective, freedom is this. Freedom is the power to take action without hesitation, fear of failure, or risk of penalty. So you have this mental clarity, this ability to to react to the moment, to see opportunities on a field in such a way that you can make plays. We've got boundaries on courts and fields for a reason. You know, you stay within the context of that. But what we're really trying to do is get athletes to play all out, play at their full potential, not afraid of making mistakes, but instead being able to take advantage of opportunities that they see on the field or on the court and make a play.
Okay, so give us some real life. Can you give us an example of this? You know, for coaches watching this, maybe with a mentor or with a group of coaches. What are some examples? How have you seen this in your own life?
So for many years, I coached lacrosse, and as a lacrosse coach, I had teams with super talented kids on those teams, and I remember one year in particular, I was an assistant coach. I was kind of the bench coach. You know, when everything went wrong out here, the players would come to me. And the head coach at that time was like he was operating the game from PlayStation 2. It's like he had the controller and he was telling everybody what to do. Pass to there, move to here, cut through here. And as a coach on the sideline, it made me cringe. I could tell the parents on the other side were tired of this coach not letting our players play with freedom. And every time someone would make a mistake on the field, they got pulled. Every single time. Somebody puts a ball on the ground, somebody makes a bad pass, somebody misses an opportunity or maybe runs a play in a wrong way, or tries something creative. Every single time they made a mistake, they got pulled. And so that player would come off the field and I'd be there, and there was no instruction between the head coach and the person that was pulled off the field. So this athlete goes to the sideline without any instruction about what they did wrong. The coach is frustrated that the player's not playing within their framework. And there's all kinds of frustration on the sideline. You know, and so we're missing out on teachable moments because we're not teaching kids to look for opportunities on the field and really play with freedom without this idea that every single time I make a mistake, I'm going to pay a price for it.
Yeah, because probably for the athletes now, they're not going to be creative. They're not going to ever take risks.
No.
So when you don't do that, you don't grow. You don't move forward as an athlete.
And you play tentative.
Yeah.
You know, if you've ever seen an athlete who's afraid to make a mistake, they actually underperform. They don't experience their full potential on the field. They're not the type of player that you know that they can be. So what we've decided is, how do we take that situation and turn it around and create a culture that creates a framework? Because as every coach will know, we've got a game plan. We've got plays that we run. We've got systems in place, both offensively and defensively and in transition. How do we create that culture where a player plays with freedom within the system that you've created?
All right, so Jimmy, how do you then, as a coach, how do I strike that balance?
Yeah, how do you strike the balance where we don't want a lack of discipline on the field?
Right.
We want people to run the plays the way we want them to run them, but at the same time, we want them to enjoy an increasing level of trust when they make a play that is kind of going for it, a little outside of our game plan, if you will, because they see an opportunity. How do we let them and teach them how to take calculated risks? How do we give them the freedom to grow and become better and elevate our performance on the field. How do we do that without completely undoing the framework that we've set? That's the holy grail, right? I mean, that's the most important thing that we're after as a coach.
Well, and not just for that one athlete who tried the thing, but for the rest of the team, for you to communicate in a way that the rest of the team knows that this is the culture of the team.
Yes.
Because, right, you don't want to just leave it unsaid for the rest of the athletes.
Yeah, that's right. You know, I had a great example of this. You know, one of the best seasons that I've ever had as a coach was coaching my son in flag football. Now, flag football doesn't necessarily have a lot of pressure. It's not like a high school or a college game that, you know, you got everything at stake. But in this setting, what I decided to do was, for the first half of the season, teach them plays, teach them formations on the field. Here are basic principles of football. And then I handed them the ball. And I left the field, because you can stay on the field as a coach. I left the field and said, hey, you've got creative freedom. I want to see what you do within the context of this. And as the game would go on, they would hear me frequently from the sideline, especially my son, who at the time happened to be a quarterback. I said, John, make a play. Be creative. Make a play. Because a lot of what we were running in a structured way wasn't working anyway. So I gave him permission. I gave him the freedom to play with freedom, to be creative on the field. And the whole team thrived on that. They come back to the huddle, and they'd be designing their own plays in the huddle. And I'll tell you what, we were a lot better when they were being creative on the field, creating the plays.
Well, let me guess, Jimmy, now your son is an NFL quarterback.
Darn it.
Not quite?
Close.
Not for
Close.
sure.
Not as much.
Well, give coaches then just some practical takeaways. So coaches watching this, you're giving them a lot to think about. What are a few things that they can do to implement this in their coaching?
I think the first thing we have to do is design this freedom and this creativity and this risk-taking into our practice setting. So into the controlled environment, give kids permission to operate, to see opportunities, take advantage of opportunities in the context of practice. If they make a mistake or if they make a great play, freeze the action, identify it. If it's a mistake, stop the play and say, what other options did you have? I love your creativity. I love that you wanted to go for it and make a play. But let's freeze frame it and let's see what other options you had that may have been more successful. And then on the flip side, if they make a great play and they're creative, let's celebrate it. Let's bring the joy back to the game in the practice setting.
That's good.
I think once you're in that game setting, though, I think number one is to resist the urge to pull a kid every time they make a mistake.
Oh man, I can't stand that. When coaches would do that to my kids, it would drive. Because again, my kids are going to be tentative now, and they're not going to grow in that sport.
That's right. I watched my second son, all my kids have played lacrosse. I watched my second son get pulled for mistakes, and then every time he went back out onto the field, he was really almost afraid to get the ball. Like, I don't even want the ball because it's likely I'm going to do something wrong, and then I'm going to come out of the game again. And you know, as a parent sitting on the sideline, it's hard to watch that, especially when you want the coach to be bringing out the best in their young student athletes. So I think those are a couple of good ones.
So what about if the coach does pull? One last thing, if a coach does pull someone, because sometimes you do have to pull kids off the field, what would you give what tips?
So my thing is, if you pull them, because you're going to have to, use that as an opportunity to reinforce your values, tell them you're excited that they're going for it and they're playing with freedom, and then coach them up in some other options that they may have had.
Yeah, that's good, Jimmy. So that's coaching with freedom, but also giving a framework. Use those questions below to talk about it with your coach or your mentor.